afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here today. My name is Brian McDonald with Arcview Capital. We're very excited about the conversation and discussion that we're going to have today. Today, we're going to discuss a few different topics. We are going to learn more about the Jobs Act, the impact that it's had on both issuers and individual investors alike, the Reg A Plus structure. That will be the first few minutes of the conversation. And then we're going to transition over to EI Ventures. EI Ventures is going through that process currently, and they are going through the Reg A Plus. So we will learn not only how that process has been for them, but learn about everything that they're working on and how they are building a business and a company around the psychedelic movement that is taking place throughout not only the United States, but throughout the world. So with that said, we're going to dive right in. Again, my name's Brian McDonald. I'm a managing director with Arcview Capital. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Arcview Capital, I wanted to just share a few minutes about us and where we play a role in the industry. So we feel like we sit at a pretty unique intersection of both working with individual investors, working with institutional investors, and then also companies and funds alike. And because we sit at that intersection, we get obviously tremendous insights, but opportunities to have access and involved with opportunities like EI Ventures and working with folks like deal makers. So today it's going to be interactive. This is supposed to be informative and educational. As we go through the conversation, if there are certain topics that you would like to see addressed that we're not necessarily getting to, please do ask questions. And then also, if there's future topics that you would like to see covered, please feel free to reach out to myself directly. You can use the Q&A function on the side, and I'll be providing my email at the end of the call. So with that, I'd like to ask Rebecca Casaba from Dealmaker to join me. Rebecca, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
So Rebecca, CEO, co-founder of Dealmaker, just to set the stage a bit, would you mind sharing with the guest a little bit about yourself, just your general background and what brought on the idea behind Dealmaker?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Brian. So I was a capital markets attorney, practiced for over 10 years, taking companies public, doing financing transactions. And there was a pain point that I saw in the market that I thought was ripe for disruption. And that was in the closing of private placement capital, where these transactions were largely paper-based. And I saw a lot of my clients struggling with it a lot and trying to pay us, their attorneys, egregious fees to help them do it because we knew how to do the process, but it wasn't really cost effective, the kind of support that we were able to give them. So hence my co-founder and I embarked on a journey to develop the Dealmaker technology. And around that time that we saw that opportunity, there was the 2008 financial crisis. Government was looking at what they could do to stimulate the economy. And as a result of that, the Jobs Act comes into effect. And so by 2016, we see retail capital raising introduced, where we thought a solution like Dealmaker could really benefit people because it brought to market a new pathway for capital for companies like EI Ventures or a lot of other cannabis companies or tech companies that use our platform, all kinds of different companies. We're launching 30 to 40 new deals a month for all different types of companies. And so what happened with the Jobs Act was really the government saying, okay, there's pathways to capital with VC money and there's Wall Street money, and now we're going to open it up to Main Street money. And that, because at that point in time, only 10% of Americans could invest in deals. And so they reduced the requirements, the net capital. You didn't have to be super rich now to invest in a deal. You just had to meet certain threshold requirements. So over the 5 years, fast forward to where we are today, the SEC went through multiple iterations with the Jobs Act. Regulation A turned into Regulation A+. They tweaked the disclosure requirements. And it's a really exciting point in time. And I'm excited to be here and talk to everyone about this because we're at a really unique time in history where we're driving on the highway as the highway is being built. Retail capital raising is exploding. We anticipate this year the market size is going to triple what it did last year, which was tripling from the year before. So a lot of exciting companies like EI Ventures taking advantage of this opportunity.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. And I know we've been working together, and we've been working together both on private companies as well as crowdfunding issuers as well, and some private funds. So to the point around the Jobs Act, how has it evolved, and how have you seen the retail investor starting to become more and more involved? And what I mean by that is, to your point, you used to have to be accredited, and you used to have these long lockup periods, and you didn't really have access to the venture investing that a lot of the institutional VC private equity type of funds had. So from the beginning, when Dealmaker was started, to today, has there been a big migration that you've seen? Have you seen a lot of more and more retail individual investors coming into this space? And what is kind of the anecdotal feedback that you could share with the audience today?
Yeah, I mean, the space is exploding. I think this time last year, we were doing a couple of deals a month. Now in the Regulation A+ space, we're onboarding, 15 new deals every month. So the space has really picked up. And I think there are, a lot of consumer facing brands, companies, BrewDogs being the original story in this space, where you have a consumer facing brand like a beer company that can take that product to market and really harness their mailing list and harness the power of the internet and allow the people who are going to be consumers of the product to actually own the product. And so one of the things I've noticed is the kinds of companies using retail capital raising is really evolving. When the exemptions came into market, it was lower usage. And some of the companies that went public had mid-level success. But what we're really seeing is the opportunity moving up market, bigger and bigger companies taking advantage of this, using this as a sidecar to a VC raise so that they can access and have their consumers really champion their brand. And that's the really exciting opportunity for our clients, the issuers, is to really make the people who are going to consume their brand, the owners of the brand, launch them pilot projects, do all kinds of really exciting things. I think that's where they can harness the power of their customer base and really turn it into something unique that we've never seen done before.
Right, right. And so in terms of, and just to give a bit of context here, a lot of the audience are familiar with us from cannabis investing and cannabis research and cannabis kind of thought leadership. So obviously today we're talking about psychedelics. How have you seen the path that some of the cannabis companies have taken? And now, as we were talking about psychedelics, whether it's psilocybin or others, the path that they are taking, and are they similar paths, or do you think that in your mind they're somewhat different?
I'm seeing a lot of the issuers that use our platform will be doing a retail capital raise and then completing a going public transaction. Some of the newer interesting things that I'm seeing issuers do, like, a Gage Cannabis that completed a $50 million retail raise in January. Really interesting trends there, where you are seeing institutional capital coming in alongside the retail investors. So that was something that I think previously a lot of people in the industry weren't sure if it would be done. And now, the power of retail has taken place such that you're seeing more established investors coming into rounds with retail capital. Just last week, I think it was, Andreessen Horowitz, big Silicon Valley VC, published a thought piece about how they think in the future, most VC rounds will include a retail sidecar. So to me, that's really exciting for the average investors who might be listening. The opportunities that you're seeing, we're seeing them go up market. We're seeing them become bigger and bigger companies. Companies like Dragonfly that just did a retail round on Dealmaker and then listed on the NASDAQ. These kinds of pre-IPO opportunities that previously you had to have a lot of wealth with a Wall Street firm to get access to. Now companies are taking it directly to their consumers and saying, hey, we want you guys in.
Right, right. And to that point, going direct to the individual investor, I think that's especially true in cannabis and in psychedelics, because the main street, or I should say the Wall Street main institutions that everybody knows, you can't get access to these companies, whether it's an individual company, a publicly traded security, or a fund. You don't have availability. So it is somewhat similar to what's going on in crypto, in the sense that people want exposure, they want to invest in this asset class, but how do you actually do it? And so what you're doing in conjunction with what we're trying to do is essentially open up that spigot to an access point to allow individual investors come into, whether it be a crowdfunding deal, a Reg A plus, an individual fund, whatever the case might be, and get access to this asset class. And so super exciting, super exciting.
Yeah, Brian, that's a great point. Like, I think that's one of the reasons it's so exciting in cannabis and psilocybins, because that there isn't that institutional blocker. As well, like the industries are young. I think the entrepreneurs that I'm seeing are really savvy, really interested in doing things in a disruptive way, really able to leverage our technology, the data analytics that it gives them, the retargeting data, the conversion rates. They really love that. They grab onto it and they know how to leverage it, which ultimately is giving investors the best access to a capital efficient company, which is great. It's a great pairing.
Right. And so your company, your platform, the technology that you have built is essentially replacing the old print out the paper, sign the document, go to a fax machine, send it in. You replace all of that. And so with that, there comes a level of responsibility and security. So if somebody's going to go in, make an investment into EI Ventures or any of the other companies that are on your platform, how do you protect their information? How do you make sure that if they're creating an ACH or a wire, that it's secure and that they're protected?
Yeah, absolutely. That's our job. I like to call it, Shopify for the capital markets. We're providing the issuers with a back end to close their store of investments. So security is ultimately important, because if investors don't feel secure, they're not going to want to make the investment. So for us, that means top line, top grade technology. We're using a lot of the same systems as NASA or the US government, constant security monitoring. And we provide a unique system in that it's closed portals. So the information that goes in stays private, doesn't get distributed out, or investors don't get retargeted with new deals.
Understood. Understood. Appreciate that. And so I would like to remind the audience, there is the Q&A feature. If you have questions, please start firing away. What we're going to do now is transition over to EI Ventures. Rebecca is going to be available throughout the formal Q&A process. So if you have a question for her, please don't hesitate and ask away. And then I'll ask Cecil to join me from EI Ventures, if you don't mind coming on stage. Cecil, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So definitely appreciate the time. I know we do have some legal compliance things that we have to air out. So Cecil, if you don't mind throwing that up, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go through this real quick. We are in a regulated, qualified Reg A plus offering. So the SEC does require that I read this out to you. So let me go ahead and just read this real quick. But basically, an offering statement regarding this offering has been filed with the SEC. The SEC has qualified that offering statement, which only means that the company may make sales of the securities described by the offering statement. It does not mean that the SEC has approved or passed on the merits or passed upon the accuracy or completeness of the information in the offering statement. And then we have an offering circular that's part of the offering statement, and it's at this link. And I know Arcview will be posting the link up here in just a bit. And you should obviously read the offering circular before making any investment. The forward-looking statement, I'm not going to read through all of that, but that's also contained in the offering circular, along with all of the other risk factors that are involved in investing in these types of companies. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to you, Brian.
Great, Cecil. Appreciate that. Thank you. And yes, this is not financial advice. What you hear today, obviously, you make your own decisions, work with your own financial professional to determine if this is appropriate for your specific situation. Obviously, myself and the team at Arcview Capital, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have and obviously address any concerns that you might have. This is a very exciting time in the industry. It's experiencing explosive growth. There's a lot of new entrants. There's a lot of ways in which people are going to be trying to build businesses essentially around this opportunity. So anything that we can help to facilitate that, to be a resource, please do view us as that. And like I said at the onset of the call, these calls are supposed to be informative and educational. So we've done a few of these to date. They've been meet the manager calls where we've been working with a private equity fund, a private mortgage REIT, a long short hedge fund, all in the cannabis space, this is the first time where we're actually going to meet the company. So Cecil is obviously representing EI Ventures. He has members of the scientific team that are going to come on stage here in a few minutes and join us as well. But to jump right in, Cecil, do you mind sharing a bit about how EI Ventures came to be, your role within the firm? If you want to touch on David, the founder, and his kind of background and experience and what led to what we now know as EI Ventures, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So EI Ventures was born by a couple of guys, my co-founders, David Nixat and Jason Hobson, really in Hawaii over 10 years ago on the island of Maui. And essentially through their journey on Maui and through their participation in a health and wellness retreat center, they began to meet some very interesting individuals that essentially are what we would call plant medicine healers, so to speak. And this idea of being able to heal the mind and the body through plant medicine really evolved from there. And essentially through that and through the years, EI Ventures has obtained a number of different IP pieces, specifically surrounding psychedelic medicine and other plant formulations for the treatment of depression, PTSD, also for cognition, mental health and wellness, and physical health and wellness. And so now we're in the process of beginning to study those particular compounds. We're in the process of beginning to put different pieces of EI Ventures together. And so I'm sorry David couldn't be on here, but I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and basically the right-hand man here.
Awesome, awesome. And in terms of your background, you are not unfamiliar with what's going on in the cannabis landscape, and you have investment and operational experience there. So I'll ask you a similar question that I asked Rebecca. Do you see similarities? Do you think the similarities that people draw aren't warranted? Do you think this is going to go on a different trajectory? I've heard from different folks that they think that there could be a path to federal legalization here faster than cannabis. So, everybody obviously has their opinion, and it's just an opinion, right? We don't know what's going to happen, but what can you share from your cannabis experience to what is going on in psilocybin and psychedelics in general?
Yeah, so our parent company, Orthogonal Thinker, is heavily invested in the cannabis space. David, our co-founder, he was instrumental in California and actually founded one of the first medical dispensaries for cannabis in California. So the roots go pretty deep in that particular area. And in terms of the way that we see this playing out, I mean, obviously, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't, predict the future here, but the way that we see it playing out is very similar to cannabis in that there are a number of initiatives within states for state legalization going on right now. So the first one that has passed is Oregon for actual state legalization of psychedelics to be used in therapeutic treatments, obviously to be administered by therapists or licensed practitioners in that state. Now they're on a 2-year plan where they're developing the infrastructure for that to take place right now. And so we have some lobbying going on there right now and are staying a part of those conversations. As far as federal, and there's a number of other states that have initiatives on the ballots right now for state legalization for therapeutic use, not recreational use. Cannabis obviously came forth for the medicinal purposes at first, and then of course now it's expanded into recreational use. We don't see recreational use in psychedelics happening anytime soon. What we do see happening possibly on the federal level, which actually just barely got shut down by a small margin, a bill that was put forward, it got shut down by a small margin. But there are other talks already going on of changing that bill up and reintroducing it, but is for the rescheduling potentially of certain psychedelics. So right now, for instance, psilocybin, which is one of our core areas of focus, is a Schedule I drug, just like cannabis. So a rescheduling of that would be something down to maybe a Schedule III drug, which would then open it up to be able to be used much like ketamine is, with ketamine clinics going on right now. and it would open it up to the same kind of a pathway. So again, there's no crystal ball into the future here, but that's kind of the roadmap that we're starting to see play out in the space, and it is happening much, much faster than cannabis. And I think because cannabis was the forerunner, right? And so there's already been a lot of work done in this area when it comes to Schedule I type drugs. And as we're getting more and more research to the potential benefits of these psychedelic medicines and drugs, we're starting to see a number of politicians open up to the idea of these particular medicines being used to treat our military veterans for PTSD. Obviously, COVID has not helped the depression that's going on in the country right now and around the world, really. And so to be able to really impact people on that level, and the science is beginning to prove it out. And that's what we hope to lend our part to this particular movement and really prove out some science. We believe we have some of the best products out there, the best medicines out there. And we're really looking forward to seeing what happens over the next several years.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so staying on kind of at a high level before we really dig into EI. So you've been involved in raising capital, exits of companies, right, on the cannabis side and in traditional sectors. The access to capital for specifically cannabis related companies is extremely challenging. You can't go to the traditional money centers. It's still federally illegal. Do you see that same thing playing out in psychedelics, or is the pathway to liquidity faster, in your opinion, for psychedelic companies?
Yeah, I think that's already been proven out, right? So there's been a number of psychedelic companies that have already gone public. The two largest would be Compass Pathways and Atai Life Sciences. Atai is now sitting at a $3 billion plus valuation. Compass is over $1 billion valuation. And there are a number of other companies that have gone public as well, and several that are uplisting to NASDAQ at the moment. So yeah, I do see it happening much, much quicker with psychedelic medicine. And the reason being is because it's really focused on developing drugs that go down the FDA pipeline. So that's one reason I believe that it's happening. The second reason I believe it's happening is because there are some very powerful studies that have been done that are just really proving that these medicines are worth taking down these particular pathways and pipelines and getting them approved for use in the human body for various conditions that really for the last 30 years, there hasn't been a lot of improvement on. And so we're using the same drugs that we've been using for the last 20 or 30 years. And in conditions for people are getting worse, there's tons of side effects and so on and so forth. And we're seeing much fewer side effects in the studies that are being done on psilocybin. I'll speak to that because that's really where our core area of focus is. Much fewer side effects and real change in people. And so I think that there is a much quicker pathway. There is a much more open opportunity, I would say, especially from the institutional investors. And now, through for the retail investors as well, for those that are not part of an institution or, part of a big investment bank or, have funds sitting somewhere like you and Rebecca were talking about in the millions and millions of dollars. And so we really do believe in access to capital. That's part of our mission. We've been a part of the Jobs Act for a very long time. And, really since the beginning, we've invested in a number of different platforms through our parent company, Orthogonal Thinker, which is an investment holding company. We've invested in a number of different platforms throughout the years that provide access to these types of opportunities, not just to the venture capitalists and the traditional capital route, but also to the retail investor. And so we're pretty excited about it. We believe that's the future as well. And just like we believe that these medicines people should have access to these medicines, we also believe people should have access to the best investments out there, or at least the opportunity to be a part of the best investments out there before venture capital, gets their hands on it, so to speak.
Right. And so to that point, Dealmaker, the technology, what they provide, that back-end experience, and the experience that you have gone through from the crowdfunding raise, now the Reg A plus. Can you share kind of the experience and what that's been like for you as the company and the issuer, and the tools that they have built that essentially allow you to communicate and keep track and keep everything kind of secure and in one place? And any insights that you have there would be great.
Yeah, so we've used a couple of different platforms over the years. We've done a couple of different crowdfund type raises for our various companies, and we recently did one for EI Ventures prior to the Reg A Plus qualification. We used a different platform at that time, and I can't say that it was the most intuitive and easy experience for us as the issuer as well as for the investor. I won't mention any names, but we were introduced to Rebecca and Dealmaker in this process of launching the Reg A Plus, and it's been a great experience. I mean, we've been able to onboard thousands of investors now in a very relatively short period of time, and really haven't had very many complications. For us as well, we're taking on investment money, so it's important for us, to have a fiduciary responsibility with that investment money. And so in our Reg A Plus qualification, we have actually allotted for a certain amount of that money to be used to be able to raise the money, right? So that's part of the process. And what Dealmaker has allowed us to do is to effectively use the amount that we've allotted and come in far under the amount that we've allotted thus far because of the capabilities of, like Rebecca was talking about, their tracking, their marketing, being able to retarget to people and being able to reach out to people in a very personal way, I think has really helped us, to be very effective with our ad spend dollars. And I think that's important to any investor. It's important to us as the issuer, because at the end of the day, what we're raising money for is to really put it into the business development projects that we're currently working on, not necessarily to, pile tens of millions of dollars into going out and raising capital. So that's something that's super important to us as an issuer. And it's something that, we've been able to do very effectively through the Dealmaker platform. So we're really pleased with it. And I'm loving the process. I'm loving meeting a number. I mean, again, we have thousands of investors now. I think we're approaching over 4,000 investors at this point. And so to be able to communicate with those investors effectively, to be able to deliver documentation and their certificates and so on and so forth in an effective, very cost-effective, very smooth manner, I think is something that's very attractive to an issuer if they're going to go out and try to do this type of a raise.
Right. And now, so on that point and transitioning to the investors and EI specifically and the strategy that you guys have laid out, can you talk to the audience a bit about what is EI Ventures? Where is EI Ventures going? How is the company essentially going to generate revenue both in the near term, and then also what are the long-term goals for EI Ventures?
Sure. Yeah, so EI Ventures is really a life and plant sciences company, and we're focused on 4 specific areas within this particular marketplace. We're an unbounded company, which means that we have several different prongs. We don't just focus on one thing. So the first thing that we're focused on is developing what we call API, or active pharmaceutical ingredient, that is the base of any kind of psychedelic formulation out there. Now, what our core focus is to do this using the botanical version of the psychedelic and not something that's created in a lab. So there's a difference there between the botanical and the synthetic. And I'll invite Dr. Strauss and Tyler on here in just a second, and they can talk a little bit more about the science when we dig into that. But we're really focused on staying true to the original mission that our co-founders had, which is really, taking healing from the land itself and bringing it to people. And so that's a core area of our focus. So we're looking at developing botanical active pharmaceutical ingredient for 3 specific psychedelic compounds. The first one being psilocybin, which actually we're using a pure version of that, which is psilocin, which is what the human body converts psilocybin into. The second one being an MDMA, plant-based version of MDMA. And then the third one being a plant-based version of DMT. So it all comes from either the fungi or the plant itself and is not created per se in a lab, which is where most companies put their focus on in this particular area. So that's the first prong of our business model. The second prong is to take those APIs and either to license them out and license them out to other commercial projects, to other studies and organizations out there that are doing study on these particular compounds, and ultimately to use them to be able to manufacture the core formulations that we currently are focused on. So the first one being Psylli, which is a formulation that we believe we can use in a therapeutic setting for particular indications. And so that would be the second phase or second component. And then the third component that we have a line of functional mushroom and nutraceutical and nootropic products called Mana, and these are non-psychedelic mushrooms, and so they can be used by anybody, of course, after they consult with their physician or doctor, of course. But they can be used by the general public without any kind of regulatory, FDA approval or anything like that. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at actually driving revenue with. First off, is our line of Mana products. And then the third area that we're focused on, and we believe this is core to really broad use, I would say, in a therapeutic setting of psychedelics, is developing health and wellness technology. In this case, it's a mobile and online application whereby a therapist can go onto that application, deliver their protocols to their patients, and continue to follow up with the patient and track the progress, and then use AI to better their treatments, to better their protocols for that particular client, to make sure the client's staying with the protocols, and then also to have telepsychiatry sessions right within the application. And so really, this is a holistic approach to mental health and wellness. And that's really what we're all about, is this holistic kind of approach rather than just one size fits all. We believe that the human body and the human mind really need the full spectrum, from therapy all the way through to the medicines, to the follow-on treatments, to using the functional mushrooms as well, to continue their health progress, and then also being able to have the application to follow up and really make sure that the patient is receiving the treatment that they need, and they're actually benefiting from it.
Right. And that obviously touched on a lot of the key points that I wanted to get to today. So thank you for going through that. So that's great, because I'm sure that's on everybody's mind, right? There's a lot that's happening from a drug development perspective. And so with that comes a long pathway, right? You have to go through the FDA. You have a lot of regulations that you have to abide by, whereas there is near-term revenue opportunities with the Mana line. And so with Mana, obviously, we don't want to put any kind of line in the sand, but are we talking 2022, or like what kind of time frame for the Mana line, and then any sort of general timeline around any of the others as well?
Yeah, so right now we're actually doing our first manufacturing run of our first product, our first SKU called Brain Mana, which is a functional mushroom blend, and it targets immune health as well as brain and brain health and cognition. And so we are looking to have that released in about 45 days. We have our tech team right now building out the websites and all the web properties for that at the moment. So actually, yes, in 2021, we're planning on releasing the first SKU of that line. And then we have 6 other SKUs in the pipeline to be released between 2021 and 2022. The other thing that I would say as far as a revenue driver for EI, more near term, is the development of our API, because once we have the API developed, and I'll bring Dr. Strauss and Tyler on here in a moment to talk about that, because that's really their area of focus. Once we have the API developed, that can be protected, so IP protected, and that can then be licensed out to other organizations, again, that are wanting to develop commercial use of this, or they're wanting to do studies and use that as a base formulation. And then the application, we're probably about 60 days away from launching that. So we have 3 different revenue drivers outside of going down the FDA pipeline, which is also something that we're going to do. And then we also have another revenue driver that we're working on, which is more of an IP play. And it's something that we would use within our own treatments, whether it's for microdosing or for macro dosing in a particular session. And it's something that we've actually just solidified, and we'll begin to do the study in a lab in California. And again, Dr. Strauss and Tyler can come on and talk more about that, because that's kind of their area of expertise.
Great. So why don't we do that? Tyler,
Yeah,
Linda, would you mind coming on stage and joining us? And while they turn this on, I'll try to get through a couple of the questions, and would encourage people to continue to fire away. We have a lot of good ones coming through, and the one that jumped out at me, Cecil, I don't know if you want to answer this one here, or if we want to have this one offline, but it says, considering the DEA's hand in all of this and their lack of correspondence regarding medicinal plant-based drugs. So what is the DEA's kind of stance on plant-based drugs? And if you have any views, and if not, we can save that one for the end.
Well, obviously the DEA is focused on drugs that are illegal, right? So scheduled drugs. And so I can't speak for the DEA, but what I can say is that if you're doing plant-based medicine like psychedelics in an illegal environment, then you're going to have issues with the DEA. If you're selling it in an illegal environment, then you're going to have issues with the DEA. We're obviously not going down that pipeline. We're doing everything above board in conjunction with FDA and DEA regulations and guidelines. So everything that we do is going to be handled in a scheduled facility. In other words, they have a license to actually study these particular molecules and these drugs. They've been granted that by the DEA. So there are labs throughout the country and throughout the world that have these particular licenses that you can use and come under those licenses to be able to study the drugs that you want to study and develop. And this is the standard pharmaceutical industry stuff. And Dr. Strauss, please jump in on that because she has all of the experience when it comes to that. She's been doing these clinical studies and trials for 30 plus years in the pharmaceutical industry. And so she's a much better person to handle that question, but I just figured I'd give my stance on it too.
Did a great job. I did start when I was 12, so I have that advantage. No, the only thing, you made a good point. None of us can speak for the DEA, and from a drug development, pharmaceutical, life science perspective, we've always sat wondering why the DEA was so involved in the first place when it's the FDA that actually reviews all the data and along with their subcommittees makes decisions on approval or not. And if you look at the scheduling of drugs, you'll very quickly realize that it doesn't say anything about benefit, anything about efficacy. This is all about potential abuse. And that is how they go from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 to Schedule 3. By the time you get to Schedule 4, the potential of abuse and the risk of dependency and addiction is low. Nothing in that scheduling says anything about the benefit of the drug. Right.
And that's what the FDA does, right? That's what the studies that we're going down the road do. One thing I will say about that, from studies that have been done, and I think data that has been collected on these psychedelics, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, and there's plenty of other anecdotal evidence out there. I don't want to incriminate myself, but at the end of the day, I can tell you that these drugs are, from my, and this is just my perspective, and then from some certain studies out there, these drugs, they're not highly addictive. You're not going to take psilocybin in a therapeutic session and want to take it the next day and the next day, or take it, 5 times a day. That's not what happens with these particular substances. So I do think we'll see a rescheduling of these drugs as more studies come along, and you won't have them in the Schedule 1 category, 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road.
Right. And you made a very good point earlier, Cecil, about research. And I think that's really probably what's the most profound difference we're seeing, is we are seeing individuals step up and conduct, the classic gold standard controlled clinical trials and asking very specific questions where we really didn't see that in the cannabis world. And today we are still lacking with, substantial clinical research going on. And I can let Tyler address it from the use side and the personal side, but I do think that has been key in the psychedelics. And I think the second one, which I'd just like to point out, and then we can continue along Brian's agenda, is that we've had technology evolve in the recent past, the last decade or two. And one of the most powerful ones is functional MRI, or what they call fMRIs. And that's allowed us to see changes in neural pathways, neuroplasticity, when they conduct this clinical trial. So it isn't just, hey, wow, did you get high? Hey, wow, did you have a trip? It's really, objective, measurable changes. And that has been an extraordinary tool for us. And I think MDMA is, going to probably be the first one that's approved out there. And I know Tyler's followed that research very closely.
Great. And Linda, with that, would you mind sharing a bit about the work that you and Tyler are doing, a bit about your background, going down the FDA path and that whole, the path to drug development can be long, right? And so obviously you've gone down that path before. Where are we with Silly, and just any kind of context that you could share with the audience would be great.
Well, briefly, I'll tell my past in a very quick way. I actually have probably three prongs to my life, three columns. I've been a professor of human nutrition at the University of California, San Diego for the past 30 plus years. I teach a very large undergraduate class, a nutrition and wellness course. I've been in drug development. Probably, I think I started in 1992 or 93, and I've worked in the full 360 degrees. I've been with contract research organizations. I've been a principal investigator. I've worked at sites that conduct the clinical trials. And then in my most recent past, I've worked for sponsor companies, biotech companies, and today I consult for them. And then as a result of my personal journey, my husband, Tyler's father, died of glioblastoma. That launched us into the cannabis space. During his illness, we used marijuana. This was pre-Prop 64, so we won't go into changes that happened, but we used cannabis and learned a lot about it, not from the perspective of somebody who simply wants to go out and smoke a joint and have fun, but to really use it medicinally, and it's very, very different. So after his death, I joined my sons actually a couple years later with Randy's Club, and we've developed hemp products that, quote, we wished we had when he was alive. I joined EI Ventures. Oh my God, I've known David and the team since probably 7 or 8 years, pretty much right after Randy died, we met. And David was a huge supporter, help, confidant, mentor, as we brought Randy's Club, into business. So we have nothing but great things to say about him and the team and Cecil. I joined as a member of their medical and scientific advisory board about a year ago now. And then Tyler joined on. And so I've been able, it's sort of strange for everybody, for all of us on the panel and attendees to watch prongs of your life come together. But for me, they really have. And we've had the opportunity to work with EI Ventures and focus primarily on the drug development pathway, if you will, of a botanical API. And it sounds like a contradiction in terms. So from the person who technically wears the black hat of the pharmaceutical industry here, when I say active pharmaceutical ingredient, there's a part of me that goes, well, yeah, it's really an active botanical ingredient. Will we ever see that nomenclature and phrasing change? We may, but Tyler and I have really consciously tried to call this an active botanical ingredient, which is what we're focused on. And our belief, again, as nutrition comes together with cannabis, that comes together with the psychedelics, the concept of that entourage effect is very, very powerful. I tell my students, it's, the whole's greater than the sum of the part. Do you want your vitamin C from the orange or from your vitamin pill? Chemically, it's the same. Ascorbic acid's the same, pull it off the shelf. But you get so much more by getting your vitamin C from the orange. You get fiber, you get water, you get other nutrients and minerals and vitamins. So the whole is greater than just throwing the sum of each piece into place. And that's what we're focused on. We're working specifically now in a very exciting time on this active botanical ingredient into creating it into the product it will be. So we go from an active botanical ingredient, think sort of a recipe, to how we put all those ingredients together to make the substance, and then what that cake looks like in the end, decorated saying "Happy Birthday, Brian" on it or something like that. So through my connections, we're working with an external service provider, a contract organization, to develop a transdermal, I'll let Tyler actually, so we're going to begin with psilocin. And that will, be our first step to characterizing our Silly product. So I don't know if you want to hear a little more about it, Brian or Cecil.
Yeah, that would be great. So Tyler, if you don't mind sharing some more about it, that would be great. And then just so the audience is aware, what we're going to do towards the end is we're going to put some links in the chat. There's going to be links that will be a resource for the Reg A Plus and the Jobs Act. There will be links for research that's being done not only around psilocybin, but others as well. And then there will be a link to the EI circular, which you can read through. You should read that if you're interested in this company. And then there's also a link where you can find more information with all of their strategy deck and all of that. And a lot of this information can be found in those links. So I wanted to share that. But yes, Tyler, please, if you don't mind sharing more about the transdermal patch, I think everybody would appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate that, Brian. I hope everybody can hear me just fine. But as Linda said, and as Cecil discussed, the challenge of developing natural API is very challenging. Recognizing that you have a complex starting material, whether it's a plant or a mushroom, being able to consistently produce, extracts that can be characterized and standardized into an ingredient that is perfectly consistent from one batch to the next. Meeting those standards, which is what the FDA requires, is the first hurdle. And so as we have decided to begin with working with a sort of a single constituent of those natural ingredients while we go about characterizing and standardizing the natural API, is really what's allowing us to develop the platform technologies for delivering these natural APIs. In the case of psilocybin or psilocybin-containing mushrooms, you have several potentially useful secondary metabolites in addition to psilocybin, which is converted into psilocin in the body, which is generally agreed, considered to be the primary active ingredient. But as we have learned with cannabis, just because THC are the principal cannabinoids found in most cannabis plants, doesn't mean there aren't other useful constituents of those plants that have a meaningful impact on individuals' preferences and subjective experiences. And so beginning the process of being able to quantify those impacts, being able to quantify the fact that the sum is greater than its parts, requires you to take a fairly sophisticated approach. And so, thankfully, being able to work with such experienced external service providers allows us to both produce consistent extracts using, cutting edge technologies, characterizing and standardizing those extracts so that they can ultimately be used as ingredients in our finished products. And one of the goals that we set out with our transdermal product was really to address, some of the challenges that arise from the peak experience that has been, reported and described with psychedelics, where when you take a psychedelic product, you tend to experience a peak, and that peak can be accompanied by several, unwanted, negative side effects, whether it's anxiety, whether it's certain degrees of dysphoria, and being able to overcome those challenges in order to have that threshold experience that allows people to make the kinds of transformative changes that they are looking for in their lives, to be able to achieve changes in their attitudes and behaviors, and in some cases their fundamental sense of identity is challenging. And so our goal with our transdermal products is to be able to sort of flatten the curve, but not just flatten the curve, but also give us the opportunity to extend that curve out as long as is necessary for someone to achieve that sort of transformational experience. Because that's one of the things that we see with psychedelics is their ability to achieve in cases where other treatments have just failed, the kinds of transformations that allow people to move past their ailments. And to one of the questions that I saw in the Q&A, one of the differences with psychedelics and cannabis is from the beginning, we're looking to help people who are suffering. And so when you're working to help people who are suffering, you have to acknowledge that you're dealing with a very vulnerable population. And so the need to meet the high standards set forth by the FDA is critical. While there is plenty of evidence showing that psychedelics are generally, considered to be relatively safe and non-addictive and non-toxic, and there's very little risk of someone having a fatal overdose. That doesn't mean that these products are not without risk. And especially when you are targeting a population that is at risk by the nature of their disorder, whether it's major depression or PTSD or some other serious mental health issue, where you do often find that there are high degrees of mortality and morbidity in those populations because of the severity of their illness. So being sensitive to that means not only acknowledging that, Mother Nature got it mostly right. We're really just trying to optimize the experience for consumers, and at the same time provide them with the ancillary tools that they need in order to track their progress and sustain the benefits that we hope that they will achieve. And so it's really, it's wonderful to be a part of an organization like EI that's not just sort of narrowly focused on, bringing products to market and generating revenue from those products alone, but also recognizing that there's a long tail as well as an early opportunity for natural products that aren't, Schedule I controlled substance. It's an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with. But ultimately, having experience in the drug development world and relationships with labs that are able to secure the DEA licensing necessary in order to do this work means that we can do a lot of this type of work in parallel. And I think that's really unique and very special. And it's, one of the reasons why I so enjoy being able to focus on my area of specific interest, because, I see all of these other very important tools being developed in parallel, so that when these products do finally reach the market, we're able to put these patches on actual human beings, that not only are they going to be able to have access to our products, but they're also going to be able to have access to the therapeutic tools that are really key to all of this. These are all valuable tools, and it's really about bringing them together that delivers the value to the consumer.
Right. Absolutely. So thank you for that. And now at this time, I know we're getting close to the 3 o'clock point here on the East Coast. I definitely want to say thank you to everybody. I'm going to ask Rebecca to come back on stage. What we're going to try and do is kind of go rapid fire as quickly as we can and get through as many of these questions as we can. There's a lot. So we definitely appreciate it. If we don't get to your question, please reach out to myself directly. I can get you in touch with anybody from Dealmaker or from EI Ventures to get your questions answered. And then also I'm going to be putting the links in the chat that will be resources for you that may or may not answer some of your questions. So one question that might be more for the scientific side is, have you guys opened an IND or received any controlled communication from the FDA regarding the API?
No, we have not to date.
Okay.
So, we won't apply for an IND just very quickly. An IND allows you to ship investigational agents, non-approved products across state lines. So we need to apply for an IND when we're ready to move into clinical. And right now, as Tyler explained, we're really in the characterization, if you will, of our botanical ingredient.
Great. And then we have a question, and no question is silly. What are the Reg A qualifications and the difference between accredited investments? Is there a big difference? And Rebecca, please, is there a difference between accredited investments and what's going on with the Reg A plus, and any color you can share?
Yeah, so that's the securities law exemption that you invested under. And what Regulation A+ allows you to do is invest even if you don't meet the net worth requirements of being accredited. But like for the purpose of valuing your investment, it doesn't really matter. It may affect your hold periods when the company goes public and the amount of time you need to hold the shares before you sell them. But again, that's the securities law exemption used for making the investment. It doesn't really affect the quality or the characterization of the investment for you.
Right. And then in your experience, I think the one biggest difference that I see with your traditional product or investment that you have to be accredited is that the minimums are very high. With the Reg A plus, what are the typical minimums that you see?
We have issuers set minimums, everything from $500 up to $3,000 on a Reg A. But I think that's true, Brian. On a 506B or C type offering, we would see much higher minimums because they're more accredited type offerings.
Right. And then I guess I'll direct this one at Cecil. In terms of the investor types, are you seeing the same types of investors in psychedelics that you've seen in cannabis? Or is this a new type of investor that's coming in that's interested in the space?
Yeah, I think there's definitely crossover there, from cannabis to psychedelics from the investor side of things. I think there's also a number of investors that are coming in that never invested in cannabis at all. I think quite a few actually that have never invested in cannabis at all. And I think that just shows the trend in this particular area and the excitement around what can actually happen to our world, when these products are finally released. And I think people are excited about that. Everybody knows somebody that has struggled with some form of mental illness, whether it's anxiety or depression, or it's something more severe like major depressive disorder. And so we've all had our lives touched in one way or another from this particular, what I would call an epidemic. And it's broken a lot of homes and a lot of families and a lot of lives. And I think that is something that really resonates with people, is the opportunity to be a part of something that can really change that. And so I don't think you quite have the same emotional pull per se in cannabis as you do with this, when something can really change the life of a family member or a friend that is struggling in this particular area. I personally have family members that have struggled with mental illness and passed on way before they should have because of it. And so it's something very personal with me as well. And that's really why I got involved with it a number of years ago, because it is something on the personal front, not just on the investment side, which obviously if you're an investor, you're definitely looking at that. But I think there's another story to be told from this at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, is that this is something that touches essentially every community, right? We know what has taken place with the opioid epidemic throughout America and throughout the world. And that's why I think cannabis investing and psychedelic investments are becoming so much more widely adopted and much more kind of accepted, because people want alternatives. And I was thinking about this call last night, and it's ironic to me that these are called alternative medicines. Right? They're plant-based medicines.
Right.
I would say the things developed in a drug are the alternative medicines, right?
Well, there you go.
So it's just ironic, but the perception is changing. So this has definitely been a very insightful and educational call. What I would like to do is just allow everybody. We'll just go around the horn. If there's anything, final comments that you'd like to add, please do. Rebecca, we'll start with you.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I think we've summed it up well. I think there's an amazing opportunity for retail investment here. And as I said earlier, we're just at the cusp of this. So more exciting things to come from innovators like Arcview in the space.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Tyler?
You're on mute.
Apologies. No, I'm grateful to be here. And, it's always exciting and an honor to be able to talk about our projects. I think that this is really an exciting opportunity for us, and also for investors who are, looking to be involved in this space. To the point that Cecil made, I think we're all starting to recognize the limits of the top-down approaches that we've taken in the past. And the fact that the products and drugs that are available for people who are suffering with mental illnesses have reached the limitations of their abilities. And, psychedelics not only represents a new sort of category of drug product, but it also represents a new approach to dealing with these challenges, more of a bottom-up approach, focusing on building resilience and allowing people to be able to, live through the stress and traumas that come in their life without suffering unduly. And so that's something that we're really excited to be a part of, and to be able to create products that will empower people to shore up the foundations of their lives in order to be more resilient in the face of all of these challenges that we may face, so that at the end of the day, they don't suffer from these mental health challenges that we're trying to address. I think that's the ultimate goal, is to not necessarily just be in the business of treating symptoms, but hopefully be in the business of managing those symptoms so that they don't need to be treated. And I think that's a very different approach than has been taken in the past, where we've waited for people to get sick before we've treated them. Instead, ultimately being able to support them throughout the course of their life in order to ensure that they are able to live the best and fullest life possible. So
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Linda?
Well, I love learning from my sons. It's an amazing experience as a parent to see that. So Tyler, that was very well said. And the other thing that we've, learned over the years is, as a professor of nutrition, it's time that we recognize that none of us can eliminate stress and anxiety in our lives. The question is how do you manage it? How do you develop that resilience? And I do find myself in interesting discussions, some heated, some not, about what we, the older generation, has created and that nothing is happening. And I do want to just share for the investors in the hopes that it encourages them. I've been at UCSD now for 30 years. The thought of having a department of integrative medicine is unbelievable. Not only do we have a department of integrative medicine, we have a mindfulness and wellness community. And yesterday, Tyler and I had an amazing conversation with a colleague there who is a part of Human Imagination, the Arthur Clarke Center for Human Imagination, and the Psychedelics and Health Research Initiative, all a part of the University of California, San Diego. And I think that says, we just have to keep going. This is an exciting time. It's not a bunch of hippies, standing in the corner. That things are changing, albeit maybe frustratingly slow for us. But I can tell you, I never would have dreamed of getting emails on, mindfulness and wellness and psychedelics and all of the stuff that's coming out of major academic centers. So I have to agree, it's an exciting time. We're excited to be a part of EI Ventures and seeing where this goes. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brian, and your team as well.
Absolutely. Cecil? Anything to add? We're 1 minute past. So
No, I don't have anything to add. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody, to you, Brian, and to everybody on the call. I'm just so grateful to be surrounded by such smart people. And, I think it just makes me look better. Right. And so thank you all for being so smart. And thanks to the people who attended and gave us your attention today. And we hope you check EI Ventures out and check Dealmaker out and what they're doing. And of course, Brian, you're a great resource and a great friend, and we appreciate you having us.
I appreciate that, Cecil. And yes, definitely thank you to everybody who joined today. The links are in the chat. Anything that we could be doing, please view us as a resource. The next call will be about a month from today. It'll be specific to crowdfunding, so we would encourage you to join us there. And please do visit us at our website, and anything that we could do, please do. Just don't hesitate to reach out. But we certainly appreciate your time. We know everybody has a lot going on. There's a lot happening in the world. So to carve out an hour for us, it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.